Okay. Risa, thank you for coming back on. It's been a while since we last talked, and I think after listening to our previous episode, I'm pretty excited for this one. We've had little side conversations along the way, and some big things have happened around the world for sure. So
Mm.
I myself have gone through a lot of changes too. So I think it's gonna be great um, to just compare, contrast, expand, and yeah, I'm pretty excited.
Awesome. Yeah, good to be back.
So I know that you mentioned a few topics you wanted to talk about. I think it'd be great to just start off with those because I think that'll really ground the conversation,
Mm.
and then we can extrapolate from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Where should we start?
So you mentioned the different influences around, well, that affect people along their path. So what I understand from Alice Bailey's teachings is that there's a probationary path, and then there
Mm-hmm.
is the which is, I think, I take it to be just just the individual living their day-to-day life, very personality centered, striving between more so towards aspiration versus ambition. I feel like ambition and aspiration are very much connected, and there's a link there. And then after that, they get onto the discipleship path, which is
Mm-hmm.
the path of service, which is what I really break it down to. And then after that is the initiate, uh, which I think they, even for myself, has been a little bit of a struggle trying to figure out the initiate versus the disciple, because Bailey kind of uses
Mm-hmm.
them interchangeably, and so does the arcane school.
Mm-hmm.
But to kind of, for the person who isn't familiar with any of these terms, I break it down. There's a person who's on the personal development stage, then they reach more so the soul knowledge stage, where they're really wanting to get to know themselves and understand their purpose, and then initiation will be kind of a more advanced version of that. That's my more so simplified interpretation, but hopefully we can connect the dots on those.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot of different words and terminologies, and it can very easily get kind of nebulous and a little confusing, and also just run the risk of mental identification, which we've talked about before. So, but nonetheless, these are certain categories that exist, and they do define really just stages and qualities of the unfolding of consciousness, and that is always what these different benchmarks of development are indicating. So when we talk about someone who is very unawakened, and they're just fully in that identification with the form in a way where they're moving along with the mass consciousness, this is a very there's very little contact with the soul, if any. What's brilliant about this is it really helps clarify why it is that you can have such an range of different reactions to certain world events, even when you've got certain things in place, such as intellect. You could have two people that have the same intellectual capacities, and yet one person seems to just blindly go with the mass consciousness, the story of the mass media, and the other person's going, well, how can you not, you're a smart person, why can you not see blah blah blah? Because it seems like if you've got the intellect, you should be able to make these delineations of logic, right? But what we see there is that, coming back to what we spoke of last time with the horizontal plane and the vertical plane, someone who's moving with a greater level of solar consciousness has more of that access to the verticality. And when you've got that connection to the interior aspect of your being, it's really the kinds of questions that you ask which bring you back to why something is the way that it is. Because someone can be very brilliant with their intellectual capacities, but they don't go deeper. And sometimes you go, why? Yes, but why does that happen? Why? And why is this person not seeing that that's the obvious next question? But really, there's a problem of depth there, or a problem of a lack of a deeper frame of consciousness, which isn't propelling a deeper inquiry, because when we start asking about the nature of consciousness, and this is kind of typified by Gemini, the sign, which is the two brothers. So esoterically, it's about sensing the other self. So when someone hits that point of development, they start contemplating the difference between my material personality life versus, oh, but there's this other part of me, and this part has different values, or I can see that this part's more selfish, but this part wants to serve more. So it's all of these different factors that come together which describe the unfolding of an individual in their consciousness. And yes, it all comes down to when we start unfolding the soul, getting to a point where we are able to aptly serve. And yes, and this takes us closer to the initiations, whether it's the first degree initiation, when we're starting to respond more to plutonic forces of destruction. So we start actively destroying our own limitations in our lives, or seeing the limitations of the mass consciousness situation, and we start reorienting and trying to reconfigure, versus the second initiation, when we go through a very deep astral purge, and it's meeting a lot of very dark density, all of that which we've carried around with us, and that kind of flushes out your system in such a deep way. Because when we start talking about really active fields of service, when we start talking about getting to initiate status, here we get a person who is able to wield quite a lot of influence potently. Whether they are a public figure or not, it's not the point. It's they're dynamically moving, they're connected to will and purpose, which is a little bit different from being connected to universal love and consciousness, by the way. And that's something that that's why we evolve through the mystical path being that which orients the person to love, solar plexus to heart. So now we're going to universal, but then eventually it has to bring in the head centers a bit more. And this is where it gets more into the realm of intelligent activity and seeing what's going on. And okay, this place needs to be penetrated and we need to organize this. And of course, we're moving into the Aquarian age, which is a seventh ray age. Seventh ray is the ray of divine expression. It is the heaven on earth ray. It has a lot to do with materiality. So it's very organizational. It's about group work. It's about making things happen. To make things happen, you need to collaborate. And that's, of course, moving away from the sixth ray age, where this ray quality of polarizing into a higher level of consciousness, that's really starting to fade out and become ineffective, basically, in terms of how that's going to, what's needed to condition the mass consciousness. So yeah, so coming back to the probationary path, for a probationary path person, we're talking about someone treading the path, starting to work with the forces of evolution, and it's a steady work. And someone is said to tread the probationary path for many, many, many lifetimes. It's slow, it's gradual, they're building character, they're becoming more of a contributive member to their community, they're dedicated to the family. It's all of these things which are still very much oriented towards the personal sphere of contacts, but we're moving in a way that's trying to develop and foster those positive qualities of character and stretching out more and more and more. When we start moving with the soul, this is where there's a deliberate kind of surrender. There's a penetration of the soul into the form. Things can move a lot quicker. We can get expansions of consciousness. We can get downloads. It's not exactly the same as past life information, but the soul is said to kind of record and build up all of that which you're cultivating through that probationary path period, and that's stored within this causal body. And so you carry with you all of the divine qualities across lifetimes, across lifetimes, across lifetimes. So when we have these bigger shifts of consciousness, we can have these flooding in of potencies and experiences of the soul. And this, of course, can explain why we have such different responses as people, or when you have an advanced soul, why they again, coming back to that intellect things. Two people, similar characteristics, similar intellect from the personality angle, and yet one person is responding to loving energy so much more sensitively, or responding to will energy so much more potently. So that's where it comes into seeing this whole geometric angle with how the consciousness unfolds. So yeah, that's the kind of 5-minute treatise on the unfolding of the soul.
Yeah,
hope it was clear.
No, yeah, there's definitely a lot. I think one thing. So the thing that I'm hearing, the mystic versus the occultist, is that's something that's really been over the past few months has been very clear for me. I even saw you post, share a post from Rick Rubin, which is I believe to be a very just like beautiful mystic, just in play. Um, and so I also compare that like the mystic being very related to the love aspect, while the
Hmm.
occultist, I believe, still I think it's the occultist. I think would lie. I mean, for me there's a balance. There must be a balance between the occultist and the mystic. I think
Of
both
course.
feed on each other, or feed off each other. But I think the occultist would be more so on the will side. Oftentimes, it starts off more so on the knowledge, pursuing truth, wanting to gain, and also for me, like the occult for me was more so about magic.
Hmm.
Very early on in my journey, and
Creativity.
yeah, and creativity. Um, so what I see, and then I guess a great example is like the recent just influxes of just so much energy that built up into the election that just recently happened.
Hmm.
Um, I I I would listen in on the conversations, and it was very interesting to see because it was almost like a battle between both of these aspects, both the will and the love aspect. And so if I can take on this kind of more
Mm.
sociological interplay, and I can hopefully use that as a microcosmic example of something that happens usually at an individual level. And so what I see, for example, is like a lot of push for unity, and I think like a lot of what the Democratic, the blue, the left was putting out was more so on the love aspect, having people feel more equal, really bring that forth. But there gets a big mix up that happens there, where there's a disconnect between the love aspect and having it actually materialize in a way that is logical. I believe that there's a big there's lot of struggle there. And also on the right, I see also this will aspect playing out, but still needing that I believe that coding that comes from the second ray, the love wisdom. And I guess I could play it. A more specific example would be I saw like this debate. I think it was Ben Shapiro. They sat up in between like 20 other Democrats. That was like the title of the video, and it was very interesting to see how Ben Shapiro debated, which was very like will this direct, almost blunt, very I would say cold almost. And
Hmm.
there was a moment where there was this individual who just like completely emotionally just like attacked them basically. But it was just there was no capacity for compassion on Ben Shapiro's side, and I feel like that was a great opportunity for him to really. There's so many great opportunities for individuals to really remove a lot of the um the labels and the blinds that people have when talking about particular parties. So I see that it was very interesting to see those two things play out. Now bringing that back to the individual level, what I see in myself, what I've seen is that there's this once I recognized the unity in all things, the love that interconnects us all. There was a almost battle, or there's this integration, really this struggle of trying to integrate the love aspect with the will aspect, which is then comes forth and is like you need structure, you need to have boundaries, you need to have um, a plan moving forward, one pointedness, single centeredness, which is very difficult, especially with the love. Um, for me, experiencing that is like wanting to expand and just wanting to just bring everything together. Is I think right now, particularly in my journey, feel like I'm transitioning more to this will aspect, really cutting off a lot of connections that I've made and really solidifying myself. um, but still, there's this constant pull between the
Hmm.
love and will, and I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and I think
Hmm.
especially early on in the journey, the love aspect is very much blinded by the emotions that rise up. And so I've always said that love is not emotional. And I think that there's a lot of things that I'm saying here. So I do want to put myself there and see if you can come in and
Yeah.
see what can be done there.
Yeah. So there's a few different things here. So in what you're getting to with like the conservatives versus the Democrats, I really see this as an exoteric polarization of the gender principles more than anything else. And we're going to come back to that in a sec. But let's start with the love thing. You're right. Love and reason are two prongs of the same thing. So you can't have love without reason. Love is logic, and we can take that as a principle and make it grounded and practical. If we're friends, we have good rapport. We're invested in our friendship, whatever. It's my responsibility, or it's our responsibility to each other to kind of give each other a whack on the head when we see the other moving out of alignment with their authentic being or something. So right there, you see that the love is connected to truth, because if I love you and I see you acting inauthentically or in a way where you sell yourself short, then I'm going to reflect that to you. But right there, it's like this is also the wisdom of Christ and the Piscean wisdom, because Pluto is the esoteric ruler of Pisces, which is the sign of the Christ, or it's the sign of the Father consciousness, right? It is to cut away all of that which stands in the way of love. So when we talk about love and the unfolding of love, it has to deepen, and it deepens through the destruction of that which isn't in best service to the unfolding of the deepest authentic self. So the shadow of the love aspect of the second ray, because it's love wisdoms, most of the rays are kind of dual pronged in their expression. The shadow aspect of the love is that it's emotional attachment, it's all inclusion at the expense of the destructive element, and in that it can become very ineffective at best, it can become diluted, and actually it can end up being divisive. And we've seen that with what's happened with the Democratic Party. And it's not just that there's a natural gender polarization there. Of course there is. This is what we see in politics. It's like a little bit more of the feminine, open, creative leaning, a little bit more the masculine, productive, economically focused. That's like the standard split. But that is just a psychological approach. There's also other factors too. There's the reality of the deep state and the darkness that has waged a war against America, and all eyes are on America as the leader of the free world, and there is a battle of good and evil basically that's going on, and this is what the Christians are responding to. And of course the neo-spiritual people want to reduce it all to this thing of polarity and meeting in the middle, and there's accurate logic to that, but there's a failure to acknowledge some of these deeper things that are moving. The deep state has corrupted and been moving through the Democratic Party for a long time. Of course, it is using the farce of compassion for including everyone racially, for instance, but they've done nothing but amp up racism. Martin Luther King, if he was alive today, Jr., would be like, what is going on? You see a lot of these people who are of minority identity moving from the Democratic affiliation to the neoconservative movement, saying, oh my God, like I was just blind. Like there's just all of this stuff that has just been brainwashed, and it's just not true at all. And then of course with Trump's a racist. Okay, well, like economically it was the best for minorities in like 30 years under his presidency with employment rates and things. So what's going on there? And of course that manipulation of the story and the narrative around Trump. Before Trump ran for president, we didn't have these like sexist, racist things. It was a really deliberate, you just see it. You see how it was reported on. And even when people react to it now, when you say, okay, can you name one thing about his policy that you don't like? Can you actually reference something that he did that was racist? It's like they can't ever do it, So there's an obvious manipulation that's going on there. And I'm not saying this as I'm a pro-Trump or anything, because as soon as you start talking about it like this, people want to, again, make it about this polarity thing without seeing the subtle nuances of like what we need to be looking at is, where is the shadow of the New World Order trying to permeate? And DK talks about this in the Alice Bailey books as well, that there's two opportunities for a New World Order. One will be based on actual unity and spiritual ideals, and that would be a kind of global unity that we can arrive at through individualization, which again, that's the love thing, like coming back to the interpersonal relation example. If I really love you, I want you to flourish most deeply as your individual self, rather than make you the same or make you, it's like, that's the shadow of the communist. That's what happens in communism. It's like, we're all one, but then the individual gets lost, and then you have no unity, and then it ends up being a dictator. And it's like, that's the logical consequence that can happen there. So so that's the potential for one angle of a more global approach. And the shadow is, that's the World Economic Forum, your Bill Gates, all of these people that are pulling the strings behind the scenes. That's their materialistic evil. And it is evil because it's evil. What is evil? It's an inversion of energy that squashes out the natural flow of life force, which would be the solar energy. That's what it does. All of the stuff with the COVID vaccines, it's just materialistic ends for fear-based, control-based, power-hungry people that, riddled with all kinds of different things. And so there's the two different angles there, right? So there's a much bigger game being played. Now, whether or not Trump is, people obviously project a father figure onto him or a savior figure onto him. That's what happens in mass consciousness. That's not necessarily a problem in and of itself. We will see if he really is a representative of the people, and whether his policies that carry out will affect change and will kind of help the USA claim her destiny, really, which is to be a leader of the free world. Because right now it's not there. It's holding that principle, which is why the whole world is obsessed with the USA. It is this, it's holding the key for this potential of the democratic freedom principle. And the soul ray of the USA, by the way, is the second ray of love wisdom. So potential there for this unifying theme. But we'll see if Trump will be able to move in that direction. He's hoping. But yeah, so if we come back to the other point, which is that the polarity thing, that's your standard split, where it's on the left, typically creative arts, inclusion of people, including the relational piece of the human being, funds for the disabled, for social workers. Like, these are the kind of typical associations. And then the right's more economic, making sure that the country is like stable and functional, and it's not going to. So it's social issues, economic issues. They kind of are a bit of that angle. And yeah, as you say, like the Ben Shapiro thing, yeah, you get people that are polarized on two ends. Whenever there's a strong polarity, there's always a desire to unify with the opposite. But if that's not being moved with consciously, it's just going to be battle. So someone like Ben Shapiro, who is really cold, hyperlogical, and really the shadow aspect of the lower concrete mind, that's what it is, Saturnian, that's the limited masculine kind of narrow-minded consciousness. He, his relationship to feeling and sensitivity and the humanity is undoubtedly
cut off, basically.
It's cut off. And so when you are cut off from something, it means you reject it in yourself, which means you will look for somewhere to project it on. That suits that's where projection gets a little tricky. Like, you'll find someone that's a really obvious example of emotionality gone wild, which is like a lot of what's on the radical leftism at the moment. And then you go, see, these people are emotional. It's like, yeah, but you just, what about integrated emotion? Or what about integrated compassion? Or where is that middle ground? So that's so unfortunately, there's a lot of this polarization right now. And yeah, hopefully we can just see an increase in interest for people that are having those sorts of conversations where there is a meeting with the middle ground there. And especially, like you say, he wouldn't be able to penetrate with his logic if he actually was moving from a heart-centered place, or he'd be much more likely to be able to penetrate logic if he was also penetrating with the heart. And this is a general statement against men too. Most men start off head-centered, and their maturation, spiritually speaking, is a grounding into the heart center, because that is the center of your consciousness. Consciousness is logic. No, consciousness is love. And love and logic are the one thing. So, he's just kind of fulfilling the role for a lot of people of that cold patriarchal force. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I had so I was reading the book, Spiral Dynamics, this morning, and I was called to read it. And I think what came to mind was then to ask you, because I think this is still very relevant. I think this is all relevant. So first off, a statement that needs to be made is that I think that if we were to be able to look at, and this is a statement that Alice Bailey pushes a lot too, which is pretty cool, that psychology will be what bridges all of these fields together,
Mm.
in a way that built, like for me, like I see it, and it's like I interpret it psychologically speaking, and the statement that you said is unity through individualization, individualization, which is, as an individual reaches higher stages of development, he sees the world differently and operates differently. And so what I'm seeing here is really a play on different levels of development, and so many different forms of projection, and also the mass consciousness being played out. If we could look at what is happening from a psychological lens, we will then be able to, basically parties would disappear. I feel like, but the left and the right will become one, and we would be able to discuss things not in terms of ideologies, but in terms of well, a true sense of self. And so,
And a valuing of that oppositional temperament. And you can imagine coming together, you go, okay, with just the intention of we're going to have a conversation and a dialectic, and I'm assuming that you've got something that's going to be relevant that you can bring to the table, and I've got something, and we're going to figure out where the point of connection or overlap is. And that is the key. It's so simple, but that, can imagine getting to that point as a collective is just like, holy shit, can you, wow.
yeah.
But that is the attitude, and of course that means we're moving with love as a fundamental principle still, because the intention is to come together. Yeah, it's still assumed that it's like logic versus love, but they're connected, and when you move with that intention, then the solution will always, because when there's real love there's a willingness to sacrifice, there's a willingness to be open, there's a willingness to change your mind, and that's that adaptability, which is still very much not something that people within the mass consciousness are capable of, because the fluidity of their consciousness is still not there. There's so much astral polarization. People are still said to be Atlantean in their consciousness, which just move into one dynamic thing, and that just takes over the brain. And we know that that's what happens. There've been cool psychological studies where they take people and they tell them information about different political parties, and the ones that they are invested in, when they give information about the opposite party that's bad, it's like the parts of the brain that flare up are like the reptilian parts. When there's an impartiality, it's their higher order thinking, like something about a party they know nothing about, that they whatever, front of the brain versus the back of the brain. So you keep people emotionally polarized, and of course this is the way in which psychology has been used to divide people. We know that the sort of negative entities like the CIA have been mucking around. They've been doing a lot of esoteric and psychological studies to understand how to manipulate and control people, and they know about these different things, and they can plant the seeds of these division and hijack the mass consciousness through the psychology.
Yeah, this is a thing where I even made a video on this, because I was watching just people's reactions to so many things. I was just watching politics, like how people discuss it, and then in my head I was like, wow, this is just like manipulation through emotions. It's like, for me I was like, wow, oh, it's so easy to influence people, if you know that people most of the time are driven by fear, and all you do is propagate narratives that are conducive to only escalating that fear, then you can give people anything and just direct their emotions and drive them towards a place where, logically they wouldn't go to. And so me understanding psychology, and I think also something that was like pretty cool for me to see, is like Carl Jung has oftentimes talked about the importance of, he called individuation, and I believe it to be the similar process of individualization, where individuation, like part of the process is breaking off from the herd mentality. and and I don't know. I just think that a basic education on psychology will have people understand what's going on at a much deeper level. Um, and I think that even right now, what we're doing is I hope to be able to present a psychological interpretation about what's going on, so that it has nothing to do with not so much politics, but rather an assessment um, of what's
Hmm.
going on. Because at the end of the day, like what you see outside is really going to be a reflection of inside what's going on at the individual level. So if we can see how we can bridge the gaps internally, it will automatically, I feel like, through time, bridge the gaps externally.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, let's hope. Yeah, we just all got to do our part. You can imagine it has to be a real huge educational reform in that way. I mean, a big part of why people want to stay polarized in their opinion as well is that it's the shame or the embarrassment when you realize you're wrong about something. And what if we had a kind of discourse where we just made that, we carried our humanity with us, or we made it so much easier to go, oh yeah, that makes sense, I was wrong about that, I can change my mind. You can to actually be fluid. We don't encourage that. There's a lot of defensiveness around our stance that we often have, and just if you employ people with the tools to exactly that, it's not about you have to believe this or you have to whatever you want to think about Trump, but yeah, if you have the skills to assess, as you just said, the situation and go, what are these different moving parts? Okay, who's benefiting from saying that Trump is this? Okay, how is the media presenting this? Or how are they responding to the even it's so funny. There was this clip of CNN, which is it prides itself on, of course, it is leftist and it is very it's like completely puppeteered by the big mogul, big media. But they say that they're impartial. But then they have this clip of themselves talking post-election. They're like, we lost. Okay, so why did we lose? And it's like, wow, you guys just admitted that you're polarized media. And just the joke of it. Yeah, so, okay, we're in the information age. So there was a big power move by Trump to go on Joe Rogan, and someone was saying that Kamala wouldn't do it because she'd run out of things to say after 45 minutes. Because when you see her talk, she's just running these weird loops of like just da 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 da. So there's this potentiality, of course, yes, misinformation, or yes, the encouragement of polarization and consuming media of a certain kind, and but we can hope that there are seeds in there of synthesis, and that within each domain there will be a few people within those slightly more polarized spaces that are trying to make links. So we can hope that across time there will be more linkage that comes of it, something like that.
Yeah, I think something very interesting is the something that I've seen. So the crazy thing for me is that I have my life, I've had my experiences, and there's been this thing that I've seen, that the underestimation of the individual. I believe that for example, even Joe Rogan, I was looking at different media and people reacting to Trump getting elected, and yeah, they're like saying we lost, and why did we lose? Is because we don't. Well, the Democrats didn't want to go to Joe Rogan; they didn't take him seriously enough, and I think that, and see this, which is I think there's a there's I think there is an underestimation of the population's intelligence. I still think that, for example, I believe that there is a revolution going on right now in terms of the media. Like I believe that it's moving more towards independent, or at least more individual. And I think there's also a reflection of the Aquarian age, where moving away from corporate more to smaller units, and so then these smaller units are getting. I feel like there's that shift in power. Um, so me seeing this phenomenon with Trump, people, I feel like people just could connect to him thanks to the long form content that podcasts give. And I think for me, I see this and I get excited. because this means that, you know, anybody can pick up a camera and start speaking their mind, and the more they do that, and the more people do that, the easier it will get for change to happen. I think that I just had this vision of, like, when I was thinking about how can I solve this, because it was so difficult to find a space where I can have a conversation with people about politics, and then not just keep on clashing. What I thought was, well, I think if everybody could just speak their mind online, we could all just understand where we all stood, and then we can meet and talk about things. And I think another thing, that the reason why I think another topic I want to talk about was the overemphasis and I think, yeah, the overemphasis on government and the underemphasis on an individual's power when it comes from individuals. What I'm saying, I think, I think people underestimate their own power, and I think corporate underestimates people's power too. And
Mm.
and as people begin to take away the power that they give to outside sources and bring it inwards, a lot of change will happen.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and because of the freedom that's possible now in terms of the free media, as I hinted at before, there's going to be both positive and negative consequences of that, because, you know, if you a big global to have a big control on all the media, you can control the narrative, but people are going mostly agreement about things, and now things are just way more, on the one hand, they're way more fractured and fragmented and diverse, the diversity thing being more of the key positive word. So we're dealing with a level of complexity that's completely new to the human being itself. You know, we just, evolutionary speaking, there's just so much information. This is part of, we're the fifth root race. We're dealing with the mental plane. The battle is on the mental plane. We're still astrally polarized at the mass level, but a lot of it is occurring through this mental manipulation. You control psychology, you control the media, you control, you know, they make a distinction in the blue books of glamour versus illusion. Combined, they are called the Maya. So glamour is more purely astral. Illusion is the mental aspect. They say that the initiate is kind of tends to be free from glamour, but they can still be prone to succumbing to illusion, and that's just wrong mental information. But, you know, you can still control people through that. You control the language, control the narrative. So yeah, there is a great deal of complexity. A big part of it's going to be, again, people becoming more personally responsible for how they engage with media, and that comes back to exactly what you were talking about, which is psychology, understanding bias, understanding polarization. If everyone learned the Hermetic principles in school, we might carry this sense of, okay, everything has this rhythmic, or, you know, it's part of the Eastern wisdom as well, which is the middle way or the balancing. And part of our Western history, we've evolved so fast when we compare it to the East. So much of the Eastern philosophy, the non-dual aspect there, it's a resolution of the opposites that comes through the Eastern wisdom, which makes it a lot of it more transpersonal, which is what Ken Wilber talked about, you know, this pre-trans fallacy thing, which I'm sure you come across. But in the West, there's much more of this dynamic, fast evolutionary process that we've gone through, which is what Jung spoke of as well. And he said it creates much more of a dynamic tension between the opposites, which creates the conflict, much more conflict, but also has within it the key to potential dynamic transformation. It's like the boiling point or friction or alchemy or something. So that's just more of a general, you know, abstract kind of conceptualization of it, but it can help to think about these things in these broader, more fundamental principled way, and to try and bring them into our daily interactions and go, okay, where am I polarized? Where can I be more neutral? And that's part of what the Bailey books talk about, which is becoming mentally polarized, which is not to say as being cold and like the Ben Shapiro hard logic, because that's mental control, and that's the limited Saturnian masculine, which cuts off life. And Shakti doesn't like that. She wants to blow the head off of that. That's Kali cutting off the heads, right? That in her the Hindu goddess with her sword. Okay, so that's the instinctual life force. That's why she cuts heads off. Anything that blocks life force, which is a hard head, versus when you bring in the integrity of instinctuality, oh, instinctuality is irrational. No, it's not. Instinctuality is that thing that tells you when a predator's in the room and tells you to get the fuck out of there, or not to speak politely to them because you're in a social setting and that's what you're supposed to do. Most people can't do that. Most people can see something uncouth going on in a social environment and everyone will know that it's bad and they won't do anything because of some sort of socially conditioned politeness. That's an example of where the head needs to get cut off. Right there. So as a hint at a deeper justice, and that's part of Uranus too. It rules Libra. Lady Justice and Kali for me are very synonymous figures. They visually look quite different, but to me they're one and the same thing. So the resolution of these gender splits is a big part of this polarization too, coming back to what is feeling, what is relatedness. When we say that we're coming out of a culture that's been masculinely polarized, okay, a lot of people are cluing on to that fact. They say the feminine, but the reality of the meeting with the feminine aspect of being, it's really difficult because the rejection that we're all carrying of the inclusion of that instinctuality, of the wisdom component, it's really quite violent. When we include that component of the feminine in our beings, this is part of individualization. If we love one another, especially in the male-female relationship, we tend to find that the woman at some point will start to be the reflector to the man, and there's a certain way in which this fractal plays out. But it's this ground of being which comes up and goes, this is bullshit. And that's exactly where the head needs to come off. And that is the deeper potential. I kind of veered off, but I can't even remember what I was talking about before. But that kind of brings us into even a bigger scope of the marriage of the opposites and the polarization, which is really the East and the West, because we have this rational component that comes from the West, which has allowed us to be Saturnianly concrete in our capacity to be efficient and organize and build. When you go to East, a lot of Eastern countries, it's kind of chaotic. It's kind of organized chaos. So everyone goes with it, but it's like 10,000 bikes in the street, beep, beep, and it's like waste issues, and it's all of so there's not enough masculine to hold the Shakti there. But then in the West, we've got too much holding and not enough flow of the Shakti. So a lot of this life force thing and unobstructing it. And I think even just in the simple way with the media stuff, that's part of it. We're opening up life force. It's like, okay, it's free for all. And the big global government, they want to control, they want to keep it down. They don't want to allow these processes of unfoldment to start having the wriggle room to actually work themselves out. They want to put a clamp on consciousness that is the negative masculine. Yeah, so I kind of went off into the gender stuff there, but you can see it all comes as part of it, because even with the archetypes, for instance, the way in which we see government as the mother or the father and wanting to, stay in the basement, so to speak. Yeah, and the consequences of the demand for responsibility we're already seeing. I mean, suicides and mood disorders and the breakdown of the family and all of this. So, yeah, it's a very interesting, conflicting time. But yeah, there's this needs of, yeah.
This feels like the culmination of everything all at once. It just feels like I think it's interesting to think about it, because it's almost like Pandora's box. Everything is, at least for myself, it feels like that. I'm not sure if this has always been like this, but I mean, the times we're living in, people are uploading the documents or like, I think the government a few years ago was talking about UFO sightings as an actual phenomenon. And then just, Trump being elected, and then RFK coming up, talking about the CIA. It's like everything's, just being like thrown out there. And now
it's amazing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I feel like this isn't just me realizing. I think this is an actual phenomenon that's going on, right?
Yeah, and it's like, it's actually enough to the point where it's mainstream. I mean, there's still a bunch of people in the mass consciousness that go, no, that's just conspiracy theory. But like at least like 1 out of 3 people maybe now. Where I remember talking about the deep state, like organized systematic pedophilia when I was like 16, 17, and people just thought I was fucking nuts. I'm like, yeah, egg on your face, bitches. Oh, yeah. But But like, yeah, so whereas okay, so that's whatever, 10 years ago, maybe
Right.
8 years ago. So a lot has changed in that time. And with the COVID vaccines, that was really the big one, because it was just a really clear split between people waking up and going, okay, this is a kind of tyrannical enforcement going on, and just the data isn't even there, and people are getting locked up and fired. What? And the split that happened between friends and colleagues and workplaces and families, and some of the violence with which people wanted to assert or go with the government narrative of it, like getting rid of friends and family. It's just wow. But right, you go, okay, that's so ridiculous, but it's exactly that investment in the lie. This is the Matrix. This is the Matrix story, which is so brilliant, a trilogy, and it's always a trilogy I come back to. And of course, it came out in 1999 at the hit of the millennium. But it's that scene with Morpheus, with Neo walking through when they're going through the training program. He's gotten out of the Matrix, but they haven't gone back in yet, and so he's kind of learning the ropes. And they're in a program, and they're walking down Oxford Street. It was filmed in Sydney. It's cheaper then. And they're looking at all the people, and Morpheus says, look at all these people, Neo. Look, these are the people that we're trying to save, but most of them are so helplessly dependent upon the system that they will fight to protect it. And of course, that is literally demonstrated in the films by the capacity for Mr. Smith to like morph into anyone when he's after them, right? So anyone that's in the Matrix, Mr. Smith can become them and like come and battle them. And that's what you see. You see this Mr. Smith phenomenon when you talk to people. You can be talking to someone and then you bring up something and you see the Mr. Smith come across, and it's like their eyes go, something else is occupying them. They say you're a conspiracy theorist, or they check out, or you can tell that they're thinking you're nuts, but that's not what they think. That's the Cancerian mental matrix. It's that mind control thing that's happening right there. And more, that phenomenon was just more experienced at a more mass cultural level when we had the COVID scenario, because more and more people were like, wow, this is messed up, and my medical freedom being taken away, like that's bullshit. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
So it's conflict at one level, but it is the hope of transformation, because yes, this is evil that's going on. There are people with corporate materialistic interests trying to manipulate the population. That is evil. Yes, there's this going on, but they're kind of coming out of the woodwork so obviously now that more and more people have the opportunity to individuate from that. Yeah.
Yeah, I see that. I mean, I've been reading I've still been reading Alice Bailey's books, and one of the things that just comes to mind is, it's necessary conflict for harmonization. Like, you're going to be getting so much clashes of different thoughts, so many different people, and clashes. I think even it's almost like wars, like culture wars is like what people term it, and it's just it just leads to so much potential for unity and truth to prevail. And I think it's very interesting to see also. I was watching this streamer. He's got like millions of subs, and he was a video game streamer, and now like he is going into politics and talking about all of these things going on. It's like so cool to see. His whole streaming base is now like
Free
into
game.
politics. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, because it's relational, and this is very Aquarian. So rather than it being, and this is why the Hollywood system's completely disintegrating. People are sick of celebrity culture, and
I love
they
to
don't
see
make
it,
the money
yeah.
that they used to, all of that glamour. Whereas before you had all the disconnect, so you could cultivate a persona. I watched a cool presentation of talking about old Hollywood, with your Gene Kellys and all of that, the golden era, and it was all deliberately crafted persona, no politics. They kind of dress them up like the predominant characters they played, and so it's that real easy separation that makes it much easier to project onto the person and keep the fan. And now again, everything's free game. So you get to see who your favorite celebrity is because they're mucking around on social media doing all kinds of weird stuff or getting into conversation like, okay, this is a real person. So it personalizes everything, which is why, again, Trump going on Rogan was a power move, because now you're seeing a person talk for 3 hours. You're picking up a lot more information. Whether he's narcissistic, of course, he's got that performer quality to him, so he can kind of ramble on and do all that. But nonetheless, it's still, why didn't Kamala Harris go on Joe Rogan? That would be the the power move on her part. But it's like, why? What is she afraid of sitting down and having a 3-hour conversation? Well, we could probably bet yes, because of all the reasons we just discussed. But and then this guy, there's a streamer becoming a politician. You go, okay, well, he's not educated. It's like, well, what does it take to be a politician? It's really a matter of principle and being firm and being able to stand strong. And whether you have a following or not, or people like you, people watching the streamer, and they like what he has to say. They think that they put their trust in him. They feel that he's genuine enough or he's competent enough, whatever. So it's really that. A much truer expression of this democratic process versus having everything be manipulated into two parties and it's this one or that one, and it's a very narrow line between issues, all of this sort of thing.
Yeah, I think one thing what I think about today is like nuance is now becoming a thing. Like, I don't know if this is like something new, but nuance is becoming the thing that people are very much like bringing forth. It's just like, it's not binary, of course not. And there's that, which is very important. And also I think I was reflecting on my target, or I was reflecting on strategy, and I think Trump was a very smart individual, and I believe him to be a much more nuanced individual than he appears to be, in conversation especially. But I see that even me bringing up RFK to people, like some people didn't even know who he was, and for me, I was like, wait, I don't know, like what, like whenever I would mention him, it was the voice. That's all people would recall. And I was like, dude, it's seriously all that you would recall from listening to him. And the thing that I think, first off, whatever happened with him not being on the ballot was pretty fucked up. And that was obviously corruption, like blatant corruption there. But I think one of the things was that there was a feeling that the polls were saying that he was not very popular, etc. But I think that first off, I don't even know if I trust the polls, but I believe that his rise is a symbol of people pushing for nuance. I think because even in his conversation, he would flip. He had changed his mind on something. I think it was abortion, and he told people, he's like, well, I will change my mind if the data's there, if there's enough data, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that politicians now, even with like Trump, I think there's still this high emphasis on inflexibility and very much attachment to previous positions that they've already taken. And I think that that with RFK, I believe, and him even being in the administration, I think there's going to be a lot more nuanced conversations, and I think that will actually open the door for more diversification of so many of these topics.
Yeah, we can hope. All eyes on America right now with what's going on. The next few years are going to be very interesting. There's a lot of astrological things going on. It's very, very fascinating time. The call to evolve is really strong right now. You talked about the fourth rays, harmony through conflict thing. Yeah, the call is to really embrace the chaos, not in an unconscious way, but to really have the courage, which is also a fourth ray quality, by the way, of really embracing just the messiness of this process, and really, and this is very much that tantric way, coming back to this Eastern thing, of really digesting everything that's going on. It's really having to take it in and go, what is this? And feeling the polarization. For me, I've felt very sensitive to the theological stuff going on. I felt very sensitive to the pull of the sixth ray, as it's like giving its last hurrah as we move into the seventh ray age. And this is a quality that happens whenever there's a transition into a different zodiacal sign in terms of the planetary horoscope. We see a kind of combat the regressive ways of the previous age, but also needing to kind of refine what are we taking from that time period with us into the future. These things I feel very sensitive to, and I can find myself in the throes of these. It's what Jung talked about with the opposites, and being filled with the conflict of the opposites, and how it's a really stressful psychological process. A lot of people don't experience it like that. It's like, this is my opinion, this is your opinion, we kind of battle back and forth. Actually resolving opposites within yourself is a very tiring physiological, psychological process of contemplation, of sitting. There's a lot going on. It's a dynamic process of friction. Consciousness isn't just mental, it's a whole process. And so, yeah, our capacity to eat and digest, this is more of that feminine thing, bringing that in. It's like, take on the suffering, take it in and process it and flush it through. And that conflict, the embrace of conflict with the potentiality of finding that harmonic third, finding something new. You have to be able to, and that starts interpersonally. You have to do it within yourself first. You have to do it with your intimate relationships. This is where the revolution starts. It has to be that purification right in your immediate sphere. Okay, because it's no use going big and global and then complaining out there without looking at, where are these conflicts within yourself? Where is the polarization within yourself? Where is the falsity and the buying into a lie in your own life with that relationship or that job? It has to be done there. That's where it's going to turn over, because the capacity for this kind of mass corporate evil to be the case is kind of a magnification of these warped patterns of consciousness at a macrocosmic level. So we need to be able to turn it inside out within ourselves first. And when we start working with the principles of truth, when you start really living this process of integrity as it unfolds as like an authentic, organic process, then that's kind of like a tree growing, and then you have deeper roots. And the deeper your roots go, you have more reach. So it has to go through you before you can go out. And that is the same as turning over that evil consciousness in yourself. Where do I buy into the lie? Where do I all of those questions, all of those things, and where can I live that process of transformation and expansion in my life right now, in my relationship life, in my parenting journey, in my work life, in my friendships? Where is that? So the process of the unfolding of truth is actually quite simple. It's the principles are always very simple. It's just the diversity of it moving within every kind of layer of existence.
Yeah, I think about it for myself. Like I mentioned that I was struggling because I didn't know whether I wanted to vote for Trump or whether I was either gonna vote for Trump or not vote for Trump. And then I mentioned that, well, my coworkers asked me basically, and then I said that, and they're like, "How could you do that? Why would you vote for Trump? Blah blah." And so it became this whole thing. And then in my head, though, I went home and I got pissed off because I was like, okay, you guys want to tell me who I should vote for, but then you spend your days either smoking or drinking on your free time. Like, it's literally like most of the whole culture around this job is like, that's how you guys have fun. And like, that's kind of, it was bothering me. And I don't know whether I should be thinking that way, because it's also like a judgment onto people and what they do. And, but I think for myself, it was more so like, you know, like, of course there would be this lack of comprehension between me and them, because it's like my habits, my lifestyle is completely different than theirs. And and uh and I still think about, then, you know, like, I'm this person, and I've always had issues with people because I'm very disciplined and very like, if I say I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it. And like, you know, yeah, I drink, but it's not excessive. Or like, yeah, I have fun, but fun for me is more so like in a structured, responsible manner. And so I don't know. I think about that, and it goes back to my conclusion, which was governance is first self-governance rather than uh, anything outside. And I think I don't know how to say that in a way that which is like not going to be offensive. Like, personally, in that conversation, it's like, bro, but you drink every single night. You go, you get out of work. Like, what? Like, how are you going to tell me that you care about this country? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how, like, I really feel
Exactly.
like, yeah. I don't know
Exactly.
what. Yeah. Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
but
Am I
here,
wrong for thinking this way? What do you think? I don't know.
no, but here, this is a perfect example, because now, when you, with this personal example that you've just brought to the table, now it becomes real in terms of where the invitation for the unfolding of the drama of life is. Yeah, I hear where you're coming from with, like, okay, where do I stay reasonable and all inclusive and loving? But it's important to remember this is part of the feminine aspect of being. You have to include that the relativity of the individual nuance of the situation, and that can include things. It's not that having frustration is a problem, emotionality isn't a problem. We have to be able to call a spade a spade. You know, it's actually okay to bring out the sword and cut the head off every now and then, and it's often not pleasant, or it may get and it's, and what you just said about these people like, oh, how can you vote for Trump? It's always people like that have that polarized action. I've seen the same thing. It's always people that have a warped relationship to the masculine principle every single time. And it's just what you said: lack of discipline, lack of responsibility. And then this emotional entitlement that comes with, as a kind of consequence, it's like a buffer against inferiority and feelings of impotency. And that's a perfect thing for Trump too, because his outward persona, whether it's authentic or it's part of his way that he plays the population, it's a very American way, but he has the superiority thing. And it's people who are superior, that's the shadow to the inferior. And so there's often that thing that goes on there. So if you're someone that has lots of feelings of inferiority, people that really step into themselves and are like, yeah, I'm the best, like, because Trump's just a loose cannon with shit like that. We're gonna win. We're the best. And it's it's the whole thing, which is a part of the problem with his rhetoric as well. And you look, this is something, a good person to research is Thomas Sowell. He's a Black American economist, and he talks about why he's writing for Trump. He's done all this research into the race issues in America, and even he's like, what the problem with the idea of systemic racism is bullshit, and you can see the blacks that suffer in America versus the blacks that do success. Their roots are like from the West Indies slaves versus the African slaves, and he talks about like what actually happened when the slave trade was going on. To like, he just talks about the roots, and it's all about the absorption of culture and how the African slaves, they got the culture cut off from them, so they absorb the hillbilly culture, and how that's like still in the, it's like, it's so fascinating. Like, he really has done all of that research. Anyway, so he's like a Black, intelligent, reasoned person, voted for Trump. He's like, I look at the economics, voted for Trump. But he also mentioned too that the problem with Trump is the rhetoric, because because he does that. He's got that Mercury square Neptune. So we're the best, we're gonna win. Just say whatever. But although, it works in terms of gathering a certain level of the population, right, that are not super intellectual. So, it's a bit of a catch-22 thing. What was I rambling on about there? So sort of like coming back to this, it's like all the people in my life, like my family, are like, oh, Trump. It's the same thing. The common thread with them and their lives: incapacity to penetrate their life. What does Donald Trump do? He flings his phallus around and penetrates every aspect of his life. I mean, to the point that it is. I mean, you do have to be somewhat narcissistic. He's gone bankrupt 3 times and bounced back from it. I mean, you just imagine the kind of like, just the thrust that he has, and which is why he's speaking to so many people too, because there's been a complete denigration and desacralization of the kind of more potent aspect of the phallic masculine, rather than like the mental, controlling, intellectual It's more just the
Like
balls
that
out. Here it
guttural,
is.
this like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he just gets shit done. I mean, he went over to North Korea, for fuck's sake. It's just like, what? To talk to, it's like no one had done that. So whatever one thinks about his politics or him personally, I mean, these are just the psychological motifs that we see time and time and time again. So as someone in my family, oh yeah, Trump, and I'm like, you have no cock in your life, and you have no idea what you're talking about, and you think you're really smart and intellectual, and you don't even have any economic information that backs up your whatever. So it's just all of these psychological biases. And yeah, so anyway, coming back to you and like, how do you deal with these people? Sometimes you do have to, you just got to throw your balls out, so to speak. Sometimes, yeah. And I'm saying balls like it's a masculine thing, but it's actually, it's kind of a Shakti thing, whether it's feminine or masculine, because it comes from the body. There's something of the body that comes.
Is that like the solar plexus? I feel like that's that solar plexus energy, very
it can be all of it
masculine in a way, right?
Yeah, it's just, it's the proper function of, let's say, Mars solar plexus energy in its balanced way is the proper territorial claiming when your space is getting violated. So that's, you know, if you see people with prominent Mars placements, martial artists, or, you know, do a lot of military stuff. But what is that? Someone who practices martial art, they can kind of come in and protect. That's the protection, the protective aspect of the masculine. So someone goes, oh, what is it? And people violate each other with emotional stuff all the time. Like those people, your work colleagues, they didn't slap you across the face, but they did dump their shame, judgment, guilt. And when we feel that, it actually lands in us through the solar plexus. So of course you would feel angry. That's the natural response to being vomited on, to being shat on. And the natural response is to say, hey, that's your shit. And actually it's just straight up. And coming back to Kali, our capacity to access those energies in the moment is really about the surrender of the head. Can you see? Because what clamps you from those, the inclusion of those right instinctual responses, or the human grit part, is like, oh, well, I don't want to offend. Maybe I should, maybe it's my problem. And that's all of that mental neuroses. It's the mental control that's coming onto that. And so that's coming to the real vulnerability of the human power. And I say vulnerability because once you stand in that, it is vulnerable. And did you see when Trump was first elected? So now I'm joining some other dots as I speak about this. The Kali thing on the Empire State Building.
No.
So there was a projected digital image of the goddess Kali on the Empire State Building when Trump was elected.
That's like,
and people had. It was like, I don't know what the hell happened there. Yeah, it was very strange. But a lot of people in the spiritual community that I know it wasn't a part of it, but like in my social networks was in different circles, they were saying that it's like a message against Trump, like and this kind of warped masculine, but just sort of.
I'd see it as, with you, what you're describing it as, it automatically jumps to like Jungian dream analysis type stuff, where it's like, here's like the mass consciousness projection of what is this election symbolized, right? It's like the cutting of the head, which is like Trump coming in and saying censorship is gonna end. I'm going after all the corruption. Like he's cutting heads. That's basically what I interpret it as.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, we say this and we be mindful of, we don't want to project anything on Trump. We're aware of the individual responsibility, and we are aware that he could still be corruptible. Time will tell. Time will tell. But we can hope, and there are certainly these interesting energies at play. And what he's saying, it does seem that the deep state, big global corporate media have never liked Trump, and they've wanted to do everything they can to get him out. So that tells you something in and of itself. That doesn't mean that he's a perfect person. It doesn't mean that every decision he makes is going to be great, but it does imply that there's a certain allying with some benefic forces going on. So we can hope in the next few years that there will be some interesting, we'll see some examples of that. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to wait, just check in. How much time do you have? I know we're kind of like, I
Just
don't know,
over an hour.
75 minutes in. It's been
Yeah.
over an hour.
Yeah. I'm fine. I can go a little longer. Just see where it naturally rounds out or whatever you want to
Okay.
do. I'm not
All
pressed.
right. I'm just gonna text my wife to see if she's okay. She sounds okay, but
That's good. Diligent husbandry.
oh no, I mean I'm learning through experience. I know she just gets. I've messed up too many times to not do it. You know. It's like,
Yeah. It's a
yeah,
lot.
I
Is it
know.
just you guys in the house?
Yeah, right now, yeah.
Three of you? Yeah.
Yeah, we live with my parents-in-law, so but they're like
Oh,
working all
nice.
the
That's
time.
good.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
good. But
That's good.
that's so one thing I love the fact that you said that, and I think I needed to hear that, which was like sometimes you just like got have to cut off the head. And for me, my experience, I think this is an experience for a lot of people, which is how to navigate these difficult things. Because for me, I've always been super I guess at a young age it manifests as passive aggressiveness, because I would see things and I would call it out, and I would hate to call it out because it would just make people uncomfortable. And then it would make, because I would call everybody out and nobody else would kind of like see what I was seeing, it
Mm,
made me feel like I was the delusional one, or
yeah.
you know what I'm saying. So I think, I don't know if people struggle with the same thing, but
Oh, it's
after
huge,
yeah,
this thing. It's
yeah.
major because whenever you speak anything honestly, it is always going to rub up against this collective denial in any situation that you're in. And it's what's typified in the current narcissism conversation in the realm of personality disorders, gaslighting and all of this. And it's all of these subtle versions of this dynamic. And it is, like I said, it is very vulnerable. You go, hey, well, what about this? And to get like punished or attacked, or even just people not even respond to you, like, what is wrong with this person? Sometimes that's even the worst one. Yeah, we have there's so much rejection of the authentic voice, you see. Just being in that is an act of rebellion. This is something it makes me think of Emerson, an initiate. He's a Libra rising, has a couple of Leo placements as well. And there's something you said before, that self-governance, that's very, very, very Leo. That's actually says in the book about Leo, one of the shadow sides of Leo is they can sometimes be lazy. And the thing is that because they reject external governance so completely, unless they source it themselves, they just become a bit like, just like the laying around lion, like I'm just great. But
Yeah.
so it's the two prong where you see either the lazy Leo or a very productive, active Leo. But that's
Yeah.
it's the self-governance. Why you see a lot of Leo in politics as well, because it's about
Interesting.
Leo is the ruling principle. My husband's a double Leo. Yeah, it's the ruling principle at all the different levels, whether it's the ruling personality, the ruling soul, the ruling spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
we
get
have
it.
to embrace that voice. Yeah, and
Yeah,
sometimes it
that's
means being willing to ruffle feathers. But it's
so
exactly that. Am I okay to break the peace, the so-called peace, which it isn't
which is
peace?
not, and I think I want to go in there deeper. Sorry to cut you off. I want to go in there deeper because I think this played out so well into also like my current job. Um I realized like the moment that you become friends, you are basically assigning an unwritten contract between you and that individual, and you don't know what you're signing up for. And that's the thing, that it goes both ways. And so my integration into this workspace was very interesting because my boss was kind of like saying these things about me before even coming in, like setting expectations, almost like, go, this dude is like gonna, really good dude, he's gonna make a lot of things happen, et cetera, et cetera. But right away I could like feel the projections already coming in of like that feeling of insecurity of like, this guy's like thinks he's the shit. And I'm like, bro, like I do think I'm the shit, but not like that. Like I have my sense of confidence and I just want to be here and like be a part of the team. And it was just like so many like subtle like indirect takes on me, and like these like faces and these like, I know how to read body language, I know how to like understand like the intonations, the changes in tone, and so being a part of that, and then hearing you say that, because I've had my run-ins. I had my clash first, like with my manager, and then I had my clash with like a few of the workers. But then that Trump situation like highlighted another like different context, but same example, which is like there's a reason why I've been so quiet and introverted when I enter situations, because it's like I don't know what I'm agreeing to while being there, and so I think this is also, I guess, what relates to introverts a lot, because the moment I expose myself is like the moment I give people the permission to almost like impose themselves on me. And so then for me, it's gonna take work to cut those connections and continue to establish myself as who I am meant to be, rather than who they want me to be.
Yeah, this is such universal and important, delicate work, what you're describing here, and it is part of this growing stronger in yourself. You'll find it gets easier with age, and part of being Gemini and Leo Aquarius, it brings the relational principle really into the forefront, the integrity of right relations. So it's going to be an endless work for you, and anyone moving with consciousness in any way runs up against some variation of this problem, because to move with consciousness, it people feel it, and consciousness, that the nature of the soul as it radiates through the being, it's healing and it's opening. But a lot of people, when they get opened or when they get touched by that, there's shit that comes up. And so even if you be quiet, you find that just your presence ruffles people the wrong way when you haven't caused any real offense to them. And it's really just the way in which the consciousness is permeating throughout their field and stimulating all kinds of things. It's there, and you're strong in yourself. So that one who's insecure about themselves is like getting their inferiority messed up, or the person who doesn't have a strong, firm ground in their own capacity for discipline, they're going to like feel that aspect of the father archetype kind of rattling around in their head, and they project that onto you, whether you get the positive or the negative, because you can get positive projections as well. They can be a little nicer to receive, but nonetheless, it's a projection.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so you get both, right? And projection. So a big part for you, and a part of the maturation through this process, is a part of it's seeing that there is a kind of universality to this process, and the law of right human relations makes it starts to live itself through our life, and we have to pay attention. The protection of your interior private space is so important. Who you let in at a personal level and who you regard as a friend, there needs to be a high threshold for that. So being clear about what is this relation. This is very Libran thing too, and that's part of Gemini. Gemini evolves through Libra and vice versa. It's like, who is this person? What exactly is the nature of the relationship? Who's got the authority of consciousness? You have to trust your intuition and assume that you're grounded enough. What is the nature of this dynamic? And you do have to be careful about, because sometimes, especially for people like yourself, where you're open and you want to connect, and that's a part of how you want to move, there can be that sacrifice of your own personal integrity with that, because you're wanting to live the love principle. But you have to see that the love principle has to be intelligent in its operating, and it's about understanding the nature. Because if you've got someone who's below you in consciousness, and then you can feel that their inferiority, and you try and compensate by coming down and like wanting to try and be friends with them, it's already fucked.
Yeah,
because you've already stepped out of it. And the person will feel it too. It might seem to be nice on the surface, but even if it's like a kid and an adult, a kid at some level will feel if you're kind of not stepping into your role as the adult, and they'll get insecure, and they'll feel like they have to do more than what they're capable of doing. And so it's all kinds of difficult things, and part of that is difficult too, because it requires us to acknowledge our capacity, and sometimes that can feel like an arrogant thing, like, can I really say that I have more consciousness than this person in the moment?
Yeah, that's difficult. Yeah,
but it's not about superiority. It's just what is the capacity of consciousness in that moment? And that just, it can simplify things. So it's knowing who is a friend, who is a client, who is a mentee, where is there the proper conditions about relating, and is this person kind of acting like a mentee, but it's not really an official dynamic. So I'm kind of, my energy's leaking when I speak to them, or they're kind of not fully taking responsibility. So they kind of go, oh yeah, that's cool, but they don't really apply it. And then, so all of these different things are all these kinds of energy leaks, and it all is telling us where to refine this. And it is a really refined work. Christ said, pearls before swine. That's the classic thing. And particularly with spiritual people, when you're open and you're creative, you want to just kind of like throw it all out there and like, this is me and this is what I'm interested in. And you got to really, it's part of that leadership thing. It's part of the nuance. It's part of maturing, is that your best capacity to serve people in relationships is to know the nature of that relationship and know exactly how you need to serve and show up in that moment. And that's going to look very different for each person and of different capacities. I've found myself in situations, because I've had the inferiority problem, and so I've tended to bring myself down. And when I've done that, I always run up into issues. I end up giving too much to someone where it's not reciprocal enough, or I'm over explaining myself to someone who doesn't really want to listen. And these become, and then I feel weakened, I feel exhausted, I feel unseen and used. But I did that to myself first by consenting to that dynamic. So you can't make it the other person's fault, even if they are exploiting you or kind of like judging you unfairly or something. But how are you consenting to that? And where do you need to take just to show up as the full self in that moment? So, and it's very nuanced and it's very delicate, and it requires that self-honesty and also knowing what your proclivities are. Do you lean more arrogant or do you lean more self-deprecating? That's because you got to know where your own compensation, what are the hooks that get you into these sorts of dynamics. That's important to become conscious of, and to know where is always coming back to the center.
Yeah, that's really good. I think this past month I felt like an influx of like I believe it was like first right energy, like super like, yo, what are you doing? Cut this off, cut that off. Like, you need to, hone in on this, double in on that. And it was just like that. And I was like, okay, this is really, it's very powerful, very almost like, it was almost overwhelming to see myself in that like zone of just super, super just focused. And I guess it would be judgmental. I don't know how else to put it, but it's like, this is that. And I think for me right now,
Discernment.
Discernment, like learn. Yeah, it's like for me, I question like, what is the nature of this relationship? And then I doubt I doubt my mind, because I don't want to impose something, because I know in the past, I don't know, maybe, and this is the thing that I question, whether maybe at first glance I understand it and intuition is there, but then I let the situation come up and develop into that. But that doesn't mean that the other individual sees it that way either. So then that's when, this battle between like, is that truth or is that not truth? Was I delusional or was I not? And I think at one point I'm just gonna have to be able to step into my power and say, no, you're most likely right. You just have to be very conscious about it and very vocal about it, transparent.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah, and this is very Libra. Yeah. This is Libra is the sword. Right, so Libra does this oscillating thing. Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? It's the sign of justice and the right human relationship. And Lady Justice carries the sword, and you've got to be able to just cut at that certain point. And that this is the place of the supermind, of the development of that judicial mind. Saturn is exalted in Libra for this reason, that capacity to this. And of course, yes, being wary of the fact that you are human and that you are fallible. But if you're moving with the right principles, if you're approaching it if you're asking the right questions, it's like, am I trying to expand, be the most capable person I can be in this situation, versus cutting someone down emotionally or wanting to control them? When you ask yourself those questions, it can become pretty clear where you're coming from. And it has to come down to the honoring of what you most deeply sense. And that's sensing, it's like the communication with the wisdom part of yourself. That's the feminine masculine axis, or the ego self axis even, where you have to be in communication with that and to opt for the responsibility of living that. And that can be like, okay, this is seeing that I see that this relationship is a farce. It's built on a dynamic that's not right. And that doesn't mean that you hate the person or that they're a bad person. It just means that it's out of integrity. And whether it just means that you withdraw from that person, or if it's the nature of the dynamic is more of a heavy contract, and you actually have to speak to them and actually bring, like, kind of penetrate the consciousness in to really break the shackles, because sometimes we have to do that as well. But it's different for every situation. Sometimes it's just like, oh, maybe I'm actually just shouldn't work with that client, and maybe just you stop there. So it's delicate, it's nuanced, and you always have to come back to, where am I feeling most strong, most capable, and more actualized and mature as a result of that? And what decisions am I making? What people am I engaging with? What projects am I spending too much time in that are taking me away from that inner sense? And it does require sitting, meditation, stilling it down, and having that dialogue with yourself first and foremost. And then and you can have people that you trust, their opinions you trust. That's not everyone that you love, but people that you really trust their viewpoint if you're not sure, because it really helps to be able to dialogue with stuff. James is always talking with me about stuff. Creatively, he is always a sounding board and always bouncing ideas off of me, and that's how we help each other. I'm a good sounding board generally, and can ask the right questions to help him find his way closer to himself, and help him land on it. And it can be really beneficial when we have someone who serves that function, and so we don't always have it, but just knowing who are the people that you are vulnerable with, and whose judgment you really trust to be able to maybe throw some ideas around, or if you're struggling with something, and being very clear about who those people are.
Yeah, I think I mean, and I think my wife is probably the best. Speaking of, but yeah, I think that's really it for me. I think I've learned that even having friends, I think best case, I think this is something that I feel like a lot of people benefit from, which is your soul is the best, best consultant, best guide. Just constant reflection, constant times of isolation have given me that insight. And I think when, like, reflecting on these things, is me, it's either it's only my wife or it's me, and then that's literally like most of the time where I seek that advice, I guess would be the word.
And she's kind of serving as an anima function in that as well. It's like you trust her judgment, you trust that she loves you, and that she can see through some of your blind spots or whatever, and you go in the dialogue about that. And that's important, and that is the balance. That's this very seventh ray process right there, of that consciousness communicating with the unconscious. And when you've got a good woman, she can serve that function very well for a man.
Yeah. So this is really good. I just want to see if there's a place that I can go back and just finish. One of the main things, I think creativity is a really big topic that we can go into most likely in the future, because there's so many things I would like to talk to you about in terms of that. But my question would be, what do you think about people? So I just watched this video of this guy earlier this morning. He said he didn't vote, that he doesn't care. And I think Abraham Hicks also has mentioned something like that, like it doesn't matter. But I think in my mind, through much more, I feel like this is all work for myself. Like me taking in these conversations and just consuming all of this content. Obviously, like, I don't really consume content often in social media, but during this time, it was really important for me to see all of these different perspectives, and try to basically solve problems. Like, that's really what I desire, is to solve problems. But for me, it's like, I think the message shouldn't be, it doesn't matter. I think the message should be, focus on yourself. Primarily, don't put so much power onto the government, but all things matter. I feel like, I think that would be my response to that question. But what would be your take on people who are spiritual but are saying, the government holds no weight or doesn't matter?
Yeah, it's that will to peace thing that we spoke of last time, where the approach is still somewhat egocentric in how people are approaching their consciousness. Yeah, in a broader way, we can say nothing matters or it's all one or da 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 da. But that kind of serves as a pre-trans fallacy, where you take some kind of non-dual platitude and you use it to excuse your own apathy
Responsibility, yeah.
and responsibility, and your inability to have the capacity to relate. And that is always the shadow side, or the danger of a lot of the esoteric or spiritual realm, is that it becomes unrelated. And that is not true spirituality when it comes to the unfolding of being in life, because that is inclusive of every aspect. It's okay if you go, okay, my plate's too full, I can't even think about politics right now because I'm just working on all these other problems. I've had that phase. Don't really have known what's going on out there. And there's a natural process of that. If you're individuating and individualizing, there can be this, it's like you're a little child almost. The unfolding of the soul is this little flower, and it's not a big epic tree that's sending messages through the mycelium network to the other plants and all of this. So there's a natural time for that, but it has to be going in, and then for the purpose of coming back out and moving into the Aquarian age. Actual evolution and expansions of consciousness are not going to happen actually really for the person unless they are engaging, because it's a seventh ray time. It's getting out there, it's relating to groups, it's working out the relational pieces. It's the will to express is the seventh ray. That's the will aspect of the seventh ray, as it expresses through the monadic level. So we have to get out there and express. Yes, there's interior processes are important, but yeah, the idea of it not mattering, that's just kind of fingers in your ears, la la land. Using some idea so that it's just about me feeling good, that kind of attitudes. I just want to feel good, not deal with the conflicts. Like, yeah, that's astral, but that's what we would expect for a trance medium to speak to.
Okay. And then I think there was that you sent me the message. You mentioned Shakti, and you also talked about that process of it being used more, I believe, more efficiently. Kind of already glossed over that. Was there anything, because I know you mentioned that that you wanted to talk about it. I think we kind of glossed over it. Is there anything you want to talk about to solidify that, or would that be too much? Would you rather dedicate more time to that specific topic?
That could really be a whole different conversation, really, about the opposites and about the relation of the gender principles and what that looks like. Part of that's the anima and animus problem, the working out of the contrasexual. So there's a big Jungian component to that, and there's very much the energy body thing of that as well. The solar plexus. What are these basic energies? What does it mean to come down into? Because that's where the soul goes. We evolve into the heart. We can have the head centers, and then the soul seeks to get all the way down into the base and roots, get into the legs and ground. And that's where our humanity is included. So just for the purposes of today, there's so much in that, right? But just for our purposes today, just to kind of surmise it, that's coming back to the thing of integrity. It's including your individuality as a human being, and also the process of nature. It's very third ray if we think of the three major rays. It's that all of that which is evolved through our human and planetary and cosmic history of the wisdom of substance, adaptable intelligence, all of these subtle processes of individuality. The rose is the rose, and it couldn't be anything else, and the lily is the lily. So the idea of seeing your individuality and your becoming as an unfolding natural process. And this is why I dropped to you Buckminster Fuller as a third house person, because it's all about process. And I mean, he was a polymath as well, by the way, so there's a very adaptable processes there in the third house. But he was all about that. He spoke about how we treat children as empty-brained receptacles, but that life is a process of unlearning. It's all unlearning, and that we're all born geniuses. Basically, it's a very kind of third-ray statement, but with the feminine thing, in terms of what that looks like psychologically, it has a lot to do with relating to the most deepest recesses of our subjective experience. And that's not emotionality, because the emotional aspect is you don't have consciousness enough to penetrate yourself. So you need that, what we might call masculine, to relate and inquire and be present with, because you need to actually hear. You need to be able to hear what those impulses are saying, or what the soul's saying, or what your individual interior guidance system, what the self, capital S, is saying. And that requires a certain maturity of consciousness, if we call that loosely the masculine component. So it's really an androgynous process, but the actual process itself, we might say, is more feminine, because it is nature moving through you, and that there is a natural process. Yes, there's metaphysical energies coming from top down and instinctual energies, but seventh ray, it's about top to bottom, and it's this process now, and the resolution of the spirit and matter, and what we actually have to do to actualize this. It's the all inclusion. It's very tantric. It's a stepping towards a kind of androgyny in a way, although as a man, it means that as you deepen into your body, you become more potent as a man. You can become more phallic, as we've been talking about, and the same thing as a woman. So there's still deep individualization of that polarity as you descend, but nonetheless, the process of that is very much one of an androgynous kind of union, or the hermaphrodite, the bringing together of consciousness and matter. So that's just my little spiel there, and just that it has to be, you can take metaphysical principles, you can take the principle of love, but it has to be applied downwards so that you're mediating with the wisdom of substance. And that's where a lot of our deeper aspects of our guidance system comes into play. And lest we forget, that's Uranus is the seventh ray planet, and it rules the sacral chakra. And that's been known as which is the creative center. Okay. Sex, money, potency, magnetism, building, very physical. And it's said to be the place where the higher mind is buried in the lower centers. So the idea of the upper intuition that emerges through form. So there's something there about that. And that we can arrive at that first through the disidentification of from form. That's the Christian thing of like, got to go to consciousness, but then coming back down. So this intuition and getting, it's like, it's the cosmic wisdom as it rises up through the lower aspect of the body. So there's a whole thing with that, and it has to do with the rewiring of the sexual energy and going into those energy centers there. But I'll just make the hint at it for now, and just to say that it's part of the epoch that we're going into, with the seventh ray being at the forefront.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll end it there. I think it was really, really good. I'm pretty happy. Anything you want to say, or?
No, it's always a pleasure. Doing the mercurial dance as we throw ideas around and see where it starts to consolidate. I'm looking forward to speaking with you more and just getting a little bit more into the nitty-gritty. I think I really enjoyed today just hearing a little bit about your personal experience and talking about some of that relational stuff, just because it becomes like really exciting when it comes to, okay, where is the integrity trying to unfold right now in the life? And I always find that that's where the juice is. And when we get to the core of it, we just find that these are universal problems too, universal challenges, that we all have them to some extent.
Yeah. I love, that's the work. That's the work for sure. But, I'm going to end the podcast there. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye.